Metheny is an American jazz guitarist. He's been active since 1974 in the realms of jazz and related genres like jazz fusion and Latin jazz. He has led the Pat Metheny Group and a band called the Unity Band, but he's also done lots of solo projects and collaborations, including at least one orchestral album and an album of music made by specially made mechanical instruments. He sometimes plays a 42-string custom guitar, which looks really strange, and it has several heads and strings that crisscross over each other. And he's also been known to play a guitar synth. From the listing on Wikipedia, I counted 62 albums, not including compilations. Ornette Coleman was an American jazz saxophonist, trumpeter, violinist, and composer. His jazz career started in the 40s. In 1959, he released an album called The Shape of Jazz to Come, which is considered a pioneer in the free jazz genre and avant-garde jazz. It's widely seen as being a pivotal album. In 1960, he released an album called Free Jazz, and that gave the genre its name. However, he always disliked the name of free jazz because he always claimed that the stuff that he did wasn't totally free and that it did have some structure to it. Some of his music has been described as being angular, particularly melodies. I have no idea what that means. In the 1970s, he embraced electric instruments and a genre of music called melodic funk, which he created. He had a band called Prime Time. Melodic funk, I'm going to read a sentence out from Wikipedia. It is associated with avant-garde jazz and free jazz, although its implications extend beyond those limits. So if you think about whether avant-garde jazz and free jazz have any limits, the intention here is it goes beyond those limits, whatever they are. He died in 2015, and he has got a sizable discography, but not as big as most jazz luminaries that have been around for that sort of length of time. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is an album of instrumental free jazz, and this is my first listen to this album. I have heard of both Pat Metheny and Ornette Coleman before, but I wouldn't say I was particularly familiar with either of them. So here we mostly have a quintet. We've got Ornette Coleman on sax, although occasionally on violin. We've got Pat Metheny on guitar and guitar synth. We've also got double bass and two drummers, one of whom is Donado Coleman, who's son of Ornette. So I would say some of this is definitely challenging listening, and so it's kind of lacking in structure. My first impression of hearing it was that it sounds like a mess. Yeah, let's qualify that a bit. So it deliberately steps out from the normal rules of music, and as soon as you describe those elements of normality as rules, you find that there will be people who want to break those rules and see what happens if you do something different. So I have three things that I want to say about challenging music and this kind of thing, so I'll try and do them quite quickly. The first one is I'm thoroughly in favour of experimentation. I think experimentation is good. I think it's good for music. I think it's good for any art form. I think it's good for science. It's good for all sorts of areas. It doesn't necessarily mean that every experiment is in its own right good. In the same way, if you were cooking, you could try some experiments of, I don't know, cabbage cake. I don't know whether that'd be good or not, but these are the ways that people find new things and explore, and stuff happens as a result of experiments. It's great. The flip side of that is that I dislike it when I feel like there's any sense of elitism, particularly when it comes to challenging music. And I think that there are some people who seem to put across this idea that you're only sophisticated if you listen to stuff that's challenging, and that if you don't like it, then that is something that's wrong with you, and you need to get more educated and more sophisticated in your listening. And I completely disagree with that. I think everybody should be free to enjoy whatever music they like and to say when they don't like music. It's exactly what I'm doing in these reviews. And then the third one is a bit more complex a thought, I think, which is that I'm pretty convinced we learn how to listen to music. So I was watching a video on tone deafness yesterday, and the guy came to the conclusion that most of us are actually born with a sense of music, and there may be some truth to that, but I think actually mostly we learn how to listen to music. So there's a very well established conventions for Western music and chord structures and scales and ways you approach it. The idea of bars and the idea of key are all structures that we've put on top of this idea of sounds that go together and sound good. And we learn how to listen to things. We do learn how to listen to different kinds of music if we embrace them. So people who are heavily into heavy metal will know how to listen to it in a way that I wouldn't. Similarly with jazz, people know how to listen, and I think this is the same. The same is true for things like free jazz. Is you can learn how to listen to it. I wouldn't say I have particularly gone down that route, but I think that these things can give you more if you have taken the time to develop that listening, as it were. Okay, right, let's go back to the album. So I said that some of it's difficult listening, definitely is. I would say there are 3 tracks that are very free. I wouldn't say they're without structure. I can hear some structure in there, but it's not harmonic, it's not bars, it's very kind of rhythms are not a kind of static thing here. I would say that there was a point where there was just the drums going, and it struck me that actually playing the drums without playing a recognizable rhythmic pattern is pretty hard. It really goes against the grain, and I think that possibly is true for all of them. There are 3 tracks which I'd say were more structured and harmonic, and I think I would say that I like those tracks better than the very free ones. I'm not completely opposed to the free ones. I just don't find it hugely easy to listen to. And there's a couple that were somewhere in between. So, which are the last 2? So, Song X Duo is just a duet, and it's just the saxophone and the guitar. And actually, listening to it, I quite like it. I can hear that there's some structure. And I can also hear that it's based on the same structure as the first track, which is Song X. So I quite like that. The freer stuff, I'd say, is beyond my limit of freeness for jazz. Some of this, I'd say, is definitely for a specialist audience, or if you want to stretch yourself into the areas of free jazz. This is possibly a more approachable album than some things that I've come across. If you're a specialist and you like free jazz, you will probably disagree completely with my score, because you're probably going to think that this is a classic. I can see how you might, but I am factoring in accessibility when I make my score. So that's what I think, and I'd love to know what your take on this album is, so please talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.